Hello, and thank you for joining our Stream of Conscious ADHD podcast. I'm Heidi Fawcett, along with my sister Heather. We are Gen X in menopause and, surprise, newly diagnosed with ADHD. Since we found out about our ADHD during the pandemic, we have spent most weekends sitting in my backyard in Brooklyn with our champagne brunch, discussing the impact, the reflections, the grief, the stories. Many adults are now finding they were never diagnosed, so we thought we would bring everyone into our backyard discovery sessions, hoping it will help. We laugh, we cry, we are stream of consciousness conversationalists. We hope you enjoy listening to our discovery and perhaps glean some comfort from it. Here we go, into the backyard.
We just wanted to introduce ourselves. I'm Heidi Fawcett and Heather Davidson. We are sisters, Gen Xers, and ADHDers, and menopausers. There's so many things. But we wanted to start a podcast because of all those things. And the fact that we went undiagnosed until our 50s, which I hear is a thing now. So just to give you a little background on the origin of this whole thing and why we are doing, and you will likely hear background noise because we are in Brooklyn and we are outside, but this is our jam. This is what we do when we talk about the things. So back when the pandemic started, we had just bought a place that had a backyard in Brooklyn. It was a mulch pit and we could not put grass or anything in because it was the pandemic, but we didn't care. It was outside. So we were in each other's pod and Heather would come over and we would sit in the backyard and the mulch pit in our little lawn chairs and just talk and have brunch. We made our own brunch, cocktails and what have you. And we would talk about things, everything under the sun, because here you are in the pandemic and quarantine a lot, what have you. And I feel like we were close as kids and on and off again throughout our lives, but I feel like this is the closest that we have ever been. And I think part of that is attributed to our time talking in the backyard about all the things. So one of the topics that had come up was back when my daughter was 5, she was in kindergarten, and she had a teacher that said to me, I just wanted to let you know, there are certain things that Grace does that I think there might be some issues there, like social cues and stuff. And I was just like, oh my gosh, oh my God. So I went to her pediatrician and said, what do I do? And she goes, well, you won't know for a while, but go just get all these evaluations. So I did. And when they diagnosed her with ADHD, just as I think it's 95% of ADHDers have another condition. My daughter's happened to be auditory processing disorder, but regardless, when Heather heard that she was diagnosed, is that she, being the clinical person she is, looked into the condition and realized there were some similarities. So
when Grace was diagnosed, of course, I'm like, I have to learn about this, as we all do for any family member who has any condition, right? And so when I was reading about it, I saw a lot of myself in the symptoms, especially when I was younger. And it was just enlightening and kind of devastating at the same time. 'Cause it explained a lot about some of the difficulties that I experienced earlier in life in school.
And just so the listeners know that so these are some of the conversations we had in the backyard, and we would laugh and we would cry and we would just be all the things. So we thought that there are a lot of women who are in our situation where we don't realize until later in life, like, wait a second, doesn't everyone feel like that? Doesn't everyone think that way? Doesn't everyone do that? And one of our favorite fellow ADHDers on Facebook, Jen, has ADHD. She's the one she's in Australia. But some of the things that she will post, and we're like, oh my gosh, that's ADHD too. Come on. Like, we're doing so many things. And so that is why we wanted to do this podcast, because I think that just the stories and the struggles and the realizations of the things, it's just mind-boggling. And you're like, what the heck? Why? How? And actually recently, Heather was going through some old memorabilia. We're going to share with my daughter over Thanksgiving.
Childhood things.
Yes.
From childhood. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and you found
some report cards from the second grade in which the teacher had been writing, Heather's not paying attention, Heather's not turning in her homework, Heather's not doing this, Heather's not doing that. And it was as early as second grade for me. So I guess at 6 years old.
7, yeah.
7. And of course, and as we'll talk about, like the differences between how boys were treated with ADD, hyperactive, and girls' symptoms are different in many cases. And at that time, when we were young, Gen Xers, when we were that age in the like late 70s, 80s, it was not on anyone's radar. No one was looking for this. Yet we still powered through successfully or unsuccessfully.
Exactly. And I feel like we all need just a huge support group, or we need retreats or something where we can just all go and complain about all the things just to get it out of our system, because it's so frustrating to know that we put so much energy into trying to do things that people who do not have these challenges, it's just a no-brainer for them. That's just the way they operate. It's like, wait a second, what? And to that point, Heather, was it comorbidity?
Comorbidity.
As I was saying, like 95% of ADHDers, I got to check that stat, have a second condition along with the ADHD. Mine is, I'm a bit OCD, and I say a bit because I think it's very slight compared to what most people go through. Yeah, mild, yeah. And Heather's is, and I honestly feel like you have more of a struggle than I do. I mean, have had more of a struggle than I have had. But Heather's is dyslexia, which I find it interesting just to hear how, because she didn't know she had a condition, how she processed that in her elementary school brain. How did you get around the dyslexia?
Well, I didn't know I had dyslexia. I just knew I kept making errors that I didn't think I was making. And they would be raised to my attention, or I would see my error and I could see what I had done. And it's not just numbers, it's letters. If I'm under stress, it's more pronounced than when I'm not under stress. And I'll switch letters, I'll switch numbers, and I'll switch words. Like yesterday we were talking about, sometimes I switch out pronouns that are not...
I keep nodding. I should not nod because they can't see me nodding.
So I wasn't diagnosed with anything when I was an early adult. My only diagnosis came when I was 55 years old, but we've learned to manage it. We didn't know we had any disorder. We just had to try harder than everyone else to be as successful as other people. And looking back on it, it's just exasperating to think about because it just took so much extra energy to be at baseline.
Right. And I feel like, because I just said, I feel like you had it a little more challenging than I did, but I feel like so many people, I think as humanity has evolved, this has become more common that our brains don't focus and never did all work in the mainstream, how they teach children and what have you. I feel like all the kids that flunked out were the ones that couldn't focus.
Yeah.
Or they just, whatever. But I just think it goes to show your level of intelligence. Even at that age, you were able to say, that's not a mistake. I didn't think I made that mistake. Or, oh, I'm looking at it right now and I made that mistake. The fact that you were like, okay, I know I need to adjust this. Any other kid would have been like, I don't know. But you were like, I need to adapt. Like,
well, what we end up doing is just we have to check ourselves more. And that's where we put in the extra energy that other people don't have to put in. You're like, okay, I keep making this error. I have to spend extra time on the thing.
See, I never did that. Well, I just always went, why does this have to be so hard? Why isn't everyone else struggling? That's where I
did
felt
that
the
too.
difference.
But it's like masking. You don't realize you're masking all of the things. But you just know, okay, I screwed this up. I have to go, before I consider it final, I have to go look at it again because I don't trust myself. And it's weird because then you get a weird, like, I don't trust myself confidence thing happening. And it has nothing to do with, it's the origin is something other than your capabilities.
And then that becomes part of your identity. Yeah. And that's just so frustrating. I can't even, because I think about how really hard, if we had used all of the energy it had taken to mask and get around these things and figure out ways, we'd been able to use that energy towards a goal or something, we would all live probably completely different lives. But we would have just been there sooner, I think.
Yeah.
One of the things that you mentioned was you're talking about how boys were diagnosed because they had the hyperactivity piece, but how the challenges in girls are different, like the symptoms are different. And so it wasn't recognized and none of us were diagnosed. And you said the boy who couldn't sit in his chair. So our mother used to just be so annoyed at me because I could not sit in my chair. I was always like sticking my legs out the back and stuff. We had those, the old school, think back to the 70s, like the ice cream parlor chairs that had the backs that just had the little swirl on them. And I would just, I don't know why, because I don't know. I had energy or something.
I was very squirmy.
And there were so many things my mother would get irritated at. Another was I was constantly dragging my hair through the ketchup. And this was another thing that just annoyed the bejesus out of her. And and I'd have crunchy hair sometimes because she just wouldn't even clean that out of my hair because she'd get so annoyed about it.
Crunchy hair.
But I'm like, why couldn't you just put my hair in a ponytail? That's what I did with my daughter when she started dragging her hair through stuff. But it's just that lack of attention. But I think my number one, besides focus, my number one most frustrating ADHD symptom is that I don't do the self-care. I don't know why. There are people who take showers every day, twice a day. Like, I just find that a big waste of time and annoying. So I have to force myself to do things that most people are probably just do on autopilot.
The whole shower thing is interesting, but if I have to wash my hair as part of it, that is just such a huge drama for me.
It's a different level.
It takes it up a notch. I'm like, oh God, I have to dry it. It's just terrible.
Okay, and maybe you experience this as well. I have pillowcases to sheet sets that I have not owned for decades. I cannot throw pillowcases away for some reason. Maybe that's the OCD side. I don't know.
Yeah,
but it's
I don't have that problem.
There's going to be a need for this pillowcase. And I'm serious, like over 20 years or more.
I do not share your obsession.
Okay, so, well, maybe there's others.
But that's the beauty of ADHD. It's like a menu of like 15 different cuckoo, and whatever you end up with is like the roulette wheel.
And then on top of it all, 95% comorbidity. So there's other things that are attributed to something else.
And it's interesting because I don't think these are separate things. I think the OCD or my dyslexia, they're just part of the happy family. That is part of the menu.
Okay. Well, that makes complete sense to me. But that's the thing I was trying to talk about before was how hello, Brooklyn, sirens, that we were talking about. Let's not try as much.
Well, we roll.
Yes. The fact that there are so many different types of symptoms, it's hard to say, oh yeah, that kid has ADHD because he's got 10 symptoms that don't match this kid's 10 symptoms of ADHD.
Yeah.
And then realizing that humanity over time, I think we've just developed these brain idiosyncrasies that now mainstream, quote unquote, mainstream kids and the way students are taught, they're the minority now. I feel like there are so many people out there that are realizing now or are realizing now, and we should do a poll or something.
Well, I'm sure there's data, right? And I look at it as the standard curve because my background is sciencey nonsense. And the people who are within one standard deviation from the mean, they are considered normal, and they target the education towards those people. The people on the two tails of the standard curve are us, right? Where we don't respond as well to the standard way of teaching. And I think over time, especially in larger cities where they're more liberal and open to alternative ways of teaching and learning, we're seeing that instead of considering them problem children or children who can't learn or children who get bad grades, they just need to teach to them differently because not everybody learns in the same way. So you need to teach differently.
Right. And a perfect example is something that happened over the last couple of weeks with my daughter. And I have this problem too. She cannot take notes and listen at the same time. And she just hit middle school where you start to have to do these note-taking things. And so I was asking her teacher if she could bring a recorder or something, because she would give the homework assignment, but then give more specific detailed directions on how to do the homework verbally. And this created a hot mess. But I am one of those people. And as I struggled more because of menopause, my brain fog or my brain capacity or focus, all the things just was amplified like twofold. So at work, and this was during the pandemic, so thankfully I could sit in a meeting on Zoom and record it because I couldn't take notes and listen at the same time. But then the problem was I would never go back and listen to the recordings because that would just end up on my list of things to do that I never get to, which brings up the whole having a gazillion tabs open on Google Chrome, and then you put them in your one tab and never go back to them again. But they were important, and that's why they were up there. But
hey, they're still important.
They are, but they're just sitting there collecting dust in cyberspace. Yeah, exactly. So that was one of my things, the tabs and the lists and all the things.
Our reason for this podcast is to support and uplift women in recognizing the impact undiagnosed ADHD has on their lives and to know that they're not alone. Discovery and grieving for what life could have been if we had only known and had help can be hard sometimes. If you have any thoughts you would like to share, you can email us at genx.adhd.sisters@gmail.com. Thank you for listening. #GenX ADHD Sisters.